Hello, everyone. I am very excited to introduce you our another wonderful guest today, Ginette Azcona. Ginette is a senior data and policy specialist at UN Women based in New York with over 15 years of experience in gender equality and sustainable development. She's been at the forefront of some truly impactful initiatives, including leading the gender responsive monitoring of the 2030 UN Agenda. Jeanette is widely recognized for her expertise in using data to drive social justice and create more inclusive societies. So, welcome, Jeanette.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're very much welcome. So, yeah, thank you also for being here with us. Jeanette. You have led numerous high impact collaborations, Janet, and also with the multi stakeholder initiatives, right? In the especially when I came across your profile in equity, climate, and human development policy space. Could you please share us a project or this one of these collaboration initiatives that stand out in terms of its impact on gender equality? And perhaps what you believe were the key factors that contributed to its success, please.
Yes, happy to. I think we've done a lot. I have to say that in my work, I'm usually juggling multiple projects, oftentimes in the sustainable development space and in the gender data space, right? Really looking for ways to partner with others to expand the knowledge and the evidence base around gender equality, and to do that with data, to do that with evidence, right?
Yeah.
And I think in that work, I've had the luck, I think, of meeting a lot of folks who may not be gender advocates necessarily, may not see themselves as folks working in the gender space. But are interested in collaborating, are interested in joining that world and working with me and with UN Women to expand the knowledge and evidence base around gender equality. And so I think that has been some of the more impactful work that I've done over the last couple of years, is really working with partners to expand the evidence base. And the example that if I had to give you a concrete example, I think the work that we've done over a number of years now with our flagship report on the SDGs, we call it the Gender Snapshot for short.
Yeah.
That report is really a testament of what can be achieved when you collaborate with others to bring attention to the barriers and the challenges that women face, right? We have,
Mhm.
of course, a standalone goal on gender equality that has been endorsed by member states around the world, by countries around the world. But we also, as a community, said that gender equality is cross-cutting, right? That if
Yeah.
we are serious about eradicating poverty, about ending hunger, that we need to be looking at that from a gender perspective. And to do that, you need to partner with others and to make
Yeah.
sure that you're expanding the evidence base that you need to tell that gender story, right? Are we seeing improvements in poverty eradication around the world? And for who? Are women
Exactly.
and girls benefiting equally? And so we've worked now for a number of years with the World Bank, for example, to
Mhm.
expand the data and evidence that we need to tell that story. We've worked with ILO. If
Mhm.
your audience is familiar, these are some other agencies within the kind of UN system who have a mandate for either working on poverty issues, which is the World Bank, or working on labor and labor rights, which is the ILO. And so we've worked with them to look at these issues from a gender perspective, to not only disaggregate the data by sex, right? So we can compare
Mhm.
men and women, but to do so also from an intersectional perspective, to look at these issues not only by gender, but by race, ethnicity, by age, and to tell that story of how women are diverse, right? And that if we're serious about achieving gender equality, we need to be doing that for all women and girls around the world, and making sure that the data and the evidence that's used to inform policy allows you to look at women in all their diversity. who's being left behind, why, and how, and what's needed to change that. So the work that we do in that space, I think, has been really influential in raising awareness on the barriers that women and different groups of women are facing, not only in terms of poverty, but also hunger, in terms of labor rights, in terms of, the impact that climate change is having on women and girls. And to do that, you work with partners, right? And so I
Yeah.
think that the success that we've had over the last couple of years is the willingness and the engagement that we've seen from our partners to work with us on this really lofty goal.
Wow. Yeah, I think I completely agree with you. So the key factor, if we want to summarize from what you said, the key factor is heavily dependent on the involving a diverse group of people, the multi-stakeholders and the community engagement itself. I think that's completely making sense. Yeah.
Yeah, we need allies, right? We can't do
Exactly.
this
Yeah.
alone.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah. So Jeanette, speaking of data, because you mentioned about how data is really essential when we want to judge everything, when we want to take action, implement any policies, decision making, something like that. Because I know that you also lead on the gender responsive monitoring of the 2030 UN agenda. How do you ensure this data collected accurately reflects the lived experience of the diverse women? Particularly, I'm more interested for those marginalized communities. And how does this influence the policy recommendations?
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, no, the answer to that is really similar to what I said earlier. It's about partnerships, right? It's about
Mhm.
working with countries,
Yeah,
with statistical offices at the country level, so that they are also prioritizing the collection of this data. It's about being intentional, right? The invisibilizing of marginalized groups of women and girls is intentional. And so the solution has to also be intentional, has to be, we realize that we don't have enough data on marginalized groups of women and girls, and we are intentionally going
yeah,
to address this lack of data, right? We're going to make sure that in everything that we do, this is a priority, and that the priority is set from the very beginning. It's too late to say, oh, we
yeah,
should have had this data here. You're not going to have it if you didn't start with the goal of prioritizing the collection of data that allows you to analyze social outcomes, right, that we care about in terms of policy and programming from an intersectional perspective, right? So you
yeah,
need to have really already within the plan, the data collection plan, a intentional objective of capturing and showcasing some of the challenges and barriers that marginalized groups of women and girls face. And so really important to work with others to do that, to emphasize to them how important it is to be intentional about this in their work as well, not just in the work that they do with UN Women, but the work that they do to fulfill their own mandate. So I think that's really, the focus of my work has been, again, how do I work with others to ensure that robust, unbiased, data is available to capture the lived realities of women in all their diversity. And when you do that, you see that actually that data can be really powerful, right? It can tell you where you're making progress, right? What regions of your country are doing better than others,
yeah,
what groups in society are doing better than others, and you can then be more targeted in your efforts, right? I think member states, of course, those are our constituents, but and the societies within them are eager to see real change,
yeah,
right? To see real progress. And so when you have good, robust data that allows you to identify who is being left behind, you can really then target your efforts in a more effective way. to reach those, right? Of course, you need political will. Of
Yeah,
course, you need other elements are important there, but we can't underestimate the importance of data for raising awareness on these issues, for getting a better understanding of what the problems are, right? You've mentioned
exactly. Yeah,
a bit the sustainable development goals, right? The goals are really what drives our work within the UN system. We want to achieve those by
mhm,
2030. This is not our goals. This is actually the goals that have been set by countries themselves, right? Rich and poor countries alike have said we want to eradicate poverty, we want to end hunger, we want to address the challenges that we see around climate change. We want to promote economic growth that is inclusive. The way to do that is by making sure that the evidence and the information that you're collecting to understand what the problems are really granular, right? Really allow you to really pinpoint where the challenges are in your own country and your own society, and that requires intersectional data. So not
amazing.
only
That's
gender
abs.
data but intersectional. Mhm.
Thank you so much for your insight, Jeanette. I absolutely agree with your statement. And if we can go back a little bit, because you mentioned it earlier about the gender snapshot,
Mm.
the because your role, one of your role, is overseeing this annual progress on the SDGs, the gender snapshot, right? What are the most significant challenges that you have encountered so far in aligning global gender equality efforts with the SDGs itself? And how can the international community particularly better address these obstacles?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest challenges that I think we are slowly chipping away at, but I think the one of the biggest challenges is the way we tend to put different issues in different boxes, right?
Yeah.
Gender equality sits over here. It's a standalone goal, SDG 5. You and Women's already working on that. We don't have to work on that. We can leave those folks there to work on these issues. We're working on goal one, end poverty. We're working here on, goal two, end hunger. And so we're going to work over here on those issues, right? But the SDGs don't say that, right?
Yeah.
The framework does say that these issues are interdependent, they're interconnected, that gender equality is cross-cutting. And so there's a lot of lip service around this, right? This
Yeah.
idea that gender equality is cross-cutting. But I think in practice, unfortunately, sometimes we still work in silos, and it's really about breaking those silos, right? Breaking those silos in terms of the research that's happening to inform these issues, but breaking also the silos in policy making and programming, right? Encouraging folks who are interested in the water crisis, for example, to look at
Yeah.
these issues from a gender perspective, right? How do we engage with women in the conversation around the conservation of water, for example, right?
Mhm.
And what does it mean to be failing in achieving some of these goals from a gender perspective, and again from an intersectional perspective, right? Who's really being left behind? And oftentimes, what you find is that it's women from poor households, from marginalized communities in rural settings that are not getting enough resources, and so there's always a gender story there. And I think really the key is being very clear about what we're talking about, right? I think we kind of sit here in the abstract, right, saying that we want to reach the goals for everyone, reaching the furthest behind first and leaving no one behind. Be more
Mhm.
specific, right? What do you mean
Yeah.
by that? Who is being left behind? And when you ask that question of who, of how, and what it looks like, right, to be feeling kind of these different forms of deprivation, you start, finding a story that cannot be told without including women and girls.
Thank you so much, Jeanette. You have mentioned about the collaboration strategies and the data collected as well, and the challenges as well. But perhaps I still want to a little bit asking further on what best strategies to ensure, or maybe have proven most effective in ensuring this data collected are the data with quality, is
Mhm.
reliable data, and also um, integrating this data to the policy discourse or something like that, that shifting public advocacy effort.
Mhm.
Some, yeah, I think
Mhm.
you understand my
I
question,
think
right?
so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, the quality piece is really key. We cannot emphasize that enough. It's not
Mhm.
just about having more data, but it's about having quality data, right? If you have a lot of
Mhm.
noise and a lot of garbage coming in, you're going to
Exactly.
have
Yeah.
garbage coming out, right? And
Yeah.
so really working with folks to make sure that the protocols that are in place, right? We know how to collect good data. We know how to ensure that we are engaging with different stakeholders on the ground, right? To ensure that the data that we're collected is also of benefit to the communities that we're trying to serve, right? So it's about the quality of the data, but also the kinds of data that you're collecting and for what purposes. Are they fit for purpose? Are you making sure that you are collecting a data, that is representative of the, population of interest? As I said earlier, are you ensuring that, your sampling technique will allow you to disaggregate the data across different dimensions so that you're not leaving, vulnerable groups behind? So that without going into the technical,
Yeah.
we know how to do that, right?
Yeah.
It's really about the political will and the commitment to doing that. From a gender perspective, I would say that in order to ensure that the data is robust, you also have to be mindful of the biases that we introduce even as researchers, right? What are the
Yeah.
things that I have to be mindful of to ensure that I'm not introducing biases even in the way that I ask the questions, right? So the data could have some issues not only in the data collection phase, but also in the data design phase, right? How are we formulating those questions? Are there gender biases already implicit that I need to be aware
Yeah.
of and address? And so there are many, many dimensions when you talk about data quality that are important to consider, but we're not starting from zero, right? This is the
Yeah.
kind of work that many folks around the world are doing. And so making sure that you're benefiting from that, very rich evidence base on how to do this and how to do this well is the first thing, right? And then you were asking about how to really integrate this, right? So if the data
Exactly.
is
Yeah.
being collected and it's stored somewhere and it's not being used for policy and for programming, then what use does it have? Great that we've collected this, and of course we're in an era where data is being collected on
Yeah.
everything and anything, right? And so, what do we then do with it, right? It's really the key, right? The power of data is to help us to build understanding and knowledge, and then of course to be a catalyst for change, for progress. And so the way that I do that and the way that I've done that is by engaging with, policymakers directly. We did a lot of work during the COVID-19 pandemic, right? At first,
Mhm.
people were talking about the impact that the crisis was having on primarily men, right?
Mhm.
Women were kind of on the sideline, and kind of forgotten. And so, of course, UN Women was collecting data, was working with partners to understand the impact of the pandemic, not only on people's health, right, but also on economic outcomes,
Mhm.
on women's time and time poverty. On all these other dimensions that really were important to understand the true impact that the pandemic was having on society. And so we were gathering all this information,
Mhm.
but we also had to act kind of in real time to ensure that that information was reaching policymakers. And so we actually organized a series of meetings with lawmakers. We worked with another organization called IPU, and we said, let's get these policymakers together. Let's get these parliamentarians together, have 5 minutes where we introduce what the issues are, what the data is telling us on the economic impact, for example, on the potential increase on violence that we're seeing, domestic violence against women and girls, and let them then talk to each other, the policymakers, right? What are you doing in your context to address these issues? What are the laws or what are the bills that are currently under review in your own country to address these issues so that they're learning from each other, right? So there's a kind of a
Mhm.
peer-to-peer exchange between lawmakers. And so that's just one concrete example of how you take this, right? This work that sits here and kind of in the research world and make sure that then it gets translated into the policy world. The other way, of course, is by, taking this information and telling a story, the way that you, Cindy, are doing, right?
Yeah, thank you.
Using data to tell a story about whatever the topic at hand may be, whether, as I said, it's water crisis or hunger around the world. Creating infographics, trying to engage with this new world of TikTok and Instagram and Facebook or what have you. I think I'm revealing my age now, right? But how do we take this information and make it accessible to young people, to people who maybe are not statisticians or not technical folks, but who need to know, what's happening around the world and their community to demand change and to hold their leaders accountable. And so really looking for ways to, again, not only have that data be used by the folks who are making decisions, but also by citizens, everyday, folks who also are hungry for information and needed to, again, as I said, hold their leaders accountable.
Thank you, Jeanette. Now I'm thinking about our current modern world. Things
Mm,
has changed a lot, especially with AI.
mm,
Over control everything.
yeah,
Maybe I would like to ask your opinion as this the last question for today's podcast, actually. How do you see AI, or at least AI impact or its complete contribution to let's say to help this data processing or anything that will help improve or accelerate or maybe uh, slowing down? What is your opinion, the data,
yeah,
the AI contribution to this?
yeah. No, it's something that we're increasingly being asked about. I think UN
Mhm.
Women is doing a lot of work around this issue to ensure that there are kind of regulations in place to protect privacy, to make sure that we're adhering to other rules that we have around data and data collection, right? Rules around do
Mhm.
no harm, rules around transparency, rules around and guidelines around participation. But at the same time, I also want to make sure that in that conversation, right, around protection, that we're also looking for ways to use this new technology to inform our work, right? Take machine learning methodologies, right, and say, well, how can this help us with some of the gaps in knowledge that we have around gender equality, right? How can we use these new ways of doing things to gain more insight and more knowledge. And so I do think that there, of course, risks associated with this new world of artificial intelligence, machine learning, et cetera. But there's also a lot of opportunity. And I want to make sure that as this work, because of course we're kind of, it's moving in such a rapid pace that, who knows what the world will look like in 5 years in terms
Yeah.
of how, this technology has been integrated in all aspects of life. But when it comes to data analysis and research, I think there is a lot of opportunity. And, I would encourage folks who are, working in kind of that space to look at these issues that they might be using this new technology for. To inform a gender perspective as well, right? So if you're looking at using machine learning methodologies to get better at, modeling climate change, right?
Mhm.
Don't forget that, another way of using this technology is to understand the intersection and the connection between, climate and gender, right? And so how do you use, these new methodologies to get better information on the impact of climate change, let's say on gender equality, on women's well-being? How do we use these new technologies to get better at understanding, the ups and downs of our economy and what impact it will have on women and girls? And so again, for me, it's about inclusion, right? Using these new technologies to increase the kind of analysis and research that folks are doing,
Mhm.
and ensuring that those are inclusive of women and girls. So again, yes, identifying the risk and being very clear about the biases that already exist in some of this new technology, because of course that's
Yeah.
also a great concern that these models are being built with biases already embedded. So it goes back to what I was saying earlier. The initial, development is really key in making sure there's a gender perspective there, but also at every stage, right? How are you integrating a gender lens?
Thank you so much, Jeanette. Actually, this is the last question. So, I just want to ask you, how optimist are you that the end of poverty goal by 2030 can be achieved in your
Um,
in your own opinion? Yeah.
yeah. The goals were always meant to be aspirational, right? So the idea
Yes.
was that, they're a communication tool, they're a policy tool, they're a programming tool. It allows us to get focused on what we're trying to achieve, what the goals and targets are over the next, couple of years, because now, of course, we're closer and closer to the 2030
Yeah.
target date. So they were always meant to be aspirational, right?
Yeah.
And I think we have a long way to go to achieve kind of, the goal of zero poverty. But I think it is achievable in terms of, encouraging governments and member states to prioritize, right? Leaving no one behind and focusing on those that are most, deprived. And poverty is a big one, right? Not having
Yeah.
enough, resources to meet your basic needs is a goal that should have been achieved a long time ago, and that is within our grasp if we have the political will, that then is of course matched by the resources, and that is then also matched by targeted efforts to reach those that typically are not being reached and not being, as I said earlier, targeted because they oftentimes are invisible even in terms of the data that's being used to inform policy. And so I think a lot of things have to happen in order for us to achieve the goal. And of course, it's really about action, right? It's about saying, this is, what we've committed to. These are the things that we need. We need resources. We need, to understand better what programs actually work, right?
Mhm.
So the evidence base to know, actually, this we tried, it's not working. Let's pivot. Let's do this other thing. And to also, be mindful that in order to really address, something like, zero poverty, you need to understand more fully, right? Have a real clear understanding of who the poor are. And if you're not analyzing the data
Exactly.
from a gender perspective, then you don't know who the poor are. You know how many
Exactly.
people are
Yeah.
poor. You don't know how many women are poor, how many girls are poor. What are the drivers and the factors that contribute to the deprivation. These are things that you have to, of course, prioritize and allocate resources to in order to achieve that very important, lofty but attainable goal of zero poverty.
Thank you so much, Gina. That was absolutely fascinating to me, and I completely agree with your insight. So, yeah, Gina, I believe you don't have a lot of time as well. So, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your incredible journey, your insights, and it's been an honor to have you in my podcast. And I'm sure that our listeners have gained invaluable knowledge from your expertise.
Well, thank you, Cindy. I'm very happy to have been a part of your podcast and really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you as well.
And that concludes our episode today. Stay tuned for more stories of compassion and advocacy in the episodes to come. Until next time, remember, kindness is contagious, so let's keep spreading it far and wherever you go.